Jesus gives us two tall orders here. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Let's take a little look at those two images. You might think that Jesus is talking about salt that we sprinkle on popcorn or add to the pot of soup that's cooking on the stove. And we might conclude then that he's asking us to somehow season the world around us, to add a little spice to it somehow. But there's a layer of meaning here in Jesus' words that we easily miss more than 2,000 years after he spoke them. If you've ever visited in the Middle East, you may have seen clay ovens next to houses along the roadside. They're basically holes in the ground, in which or over which food is cooked. Such ovens have been used, especially among poor people, for thousands of years. That's how it was in the time of Jesus. It's how it still is in Haiti, for instance. But the common fuel for such ovens wasn't oil or wood. These earth ovens were fueled by, wait for it, camel dung or donkey dung. In Jesus' day, children were sent out to collect the dung, to mix salt into it, and to mold it into patties, to be left out in the sun to dry. Then a slab of salt was placed in this hole in the ground. The dried, salted patties were placed on the salt and lit. There would be a fire. And this is the salt that Jesus is speaking of. Salt has catalytic properties which cause the dung to burn. But eventually, the salt slab loses its catalytic ability and becomes useless. Or as Jesus put it in the gospel today, it is good for nothing but to be thrown outside to be trampled underfoot. And that's just what they did with the remains of their fuel. They took it out of the hole in the ground and spread it on muddy roads to give a more sure footing for walking. So when Jesus calls us to be the salt of the earth, he's calling us to be the catalyst for the earth oven. In fact, in Aramaic and in Hebrew, the two languages that Jesus spoke, one and the same word means both earth and oven. For Jesus, to be salt for the earth, salt for the clay oven, is to start fires, to make flames, to turn up the heat. That is the fire of the gospel message, the flame of the Spirit's gifts, and the heat that burns for truth and for justice. If that's not enough, then Jesus calls us to be light for the world. How can you light up the world? It's what he says next that gives us the answer. He reminds us that people don't light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket, but rather they put it on a lamp stand to give light for all. Now here, Jesus is referring to the oil lamps people used in his day to light up their homes once it fell dark. This would be a small oil lamp with a wick in it. I ask you to picture an Aladdin's lamp. You know what Aladdin's lamp is? Okay, picture that. But then think of it as so small that you could hold it in the palm of your hand. There would be one of those in each household that would be lit at night to give light for all. And surely it needed to be placed on a lampstand. The hidden message in Jesus' words here is this: as small and as insignificant as you may think you are, indeed as you may be, if you keep the light of faith burning in your heart, then you will be a light for the world all around you, the little world in which you live, for the people who live in that world. And Jesus says, don't put your light, your faith, under a bushel basket. Don't hide it. Don't deny it. Don't shield it. Don't cover it up. Rather, let others see the light of faith that is yours, and let it brighten their world as you share with them the light that brightens yours. So even familiar biblical passages may not be as plain as they first appear. Is that salt image a little too earthy for you? Is the light image too simple or even too demanding to be light for others? And how are we supposed to become the salt of the earth and the light of the world around us? In the first reading, Isaiah answers that very question for us, where God tells us, if you share your bread with the hungry, if you shelter the homeless, if you clothe the naked, if you're careful not to turn your back on your own people, if you stop lying, if you curb your malicious speech, if you free the oppressed, if you will do these things, then your light will break forth like the dawn and rise in the darkness, and the gloom will become like midday. If we do those things. The truth is, we still live in a world where children make salted dung patties to fuel their families' ovens. And we still live in a world where families live in dire poverty without electricity for heat and for light. So Jesus is calling us to start fires, to get things cooking, to turn up the heat, to be his light, to bring his light into the darkness and into the need of the lives of the people around us. The lives of the people right around us. The people you saw all day long today and the people you'll see tomorrow. And to do whatever we can to make a difference in the poverty and the hunger of our brothers and sisters around the world. Would you believe it? Ash Wednesday is 18 days away. And then we'll find ourselves in Lent, a season that calls us to deeper prayer, fasting, and caring for the poor. It's not too early to start thinking about how each of us is going to live Lent this year. How will we be salt for those around us? Fuel for the fire. How will we fan the flame and turn up the heat to put the gospel message into action right where we are? How will we be light for others? How will we shine on those who live in the margins? Maybe the margins of my own family, my own school, my own job, my own community. How will I be light for those who live in the shadows of most of us who have much more than we really need? How will we be the salt? Jesus calls us to be the light, his light, shining in the darkness. The Eucharist we celebrate on the Lord's Day is meant to nourish us to live as followers of Jesus. As we come to the altar today, pray with me that Jesus light a fire in our hearts. Season us with the salt of grace and fan to flame the light within us that others may walk by its brightness.